Get on the ground now! Don't move!
Officer, I'm complying. I didn't do anything.
Get down right now!
You're rushing me.
I'm trying to comply!
I'm not resisting.
At exactly 6:47 in the evening, on a calm residential street in Carver Heights, Georgia, an evening jog that should have lasted 45 minutes turned into a 43-second encounter that would end one man's career, shake an entire police department to its foundation, and result in a $3.4 million lawsuit filed before the sun rose the very next morning. The dashcam footage would later go viral, racking up over 47 million views across social media platforms in less than 72 hours. But this was not your typical police encounter video. This was not a traffic stop gone wrong. This was not a case of someone resisting or arguing or escalating. This was different. This was a decorated military officer jogging in his own neighborhood, tackled to the pavement by a police officer who never once asked a single question before using physical force. What happened next would shock the United States Navy, spark a national conversation about race and law enforcement, and prove that a uniform, no matter whose uniform it is, does not make a person invincible to consequences. Before we continue, do me a favor, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from. And if you have not already, please hit that subscribe button right now, because this story gets more intense with every minute, and you absolutely do not want to miss what happens next. Marcus Ellison was not your average 45-year-old man. While most people his age were thinking about retirement savings and weekend cookouts, Marcus had spent the last 22 years of his life serving the United States Navy with a level of distinction that very few people ever achieve. He was born in Birmingham, Alabama, the second of 4 children raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a hospital laundry facility just to keep the lights on. Marcus learned discipline not from a coach or a mentor, but from watching his mother wake up every single morning at 4:30 without complaint. He earned a full academic scholarship to Georgia Technical University, where he studied electrical engineering and graduated in the top 5% of his class. He enlisted in the Navy immediately after graduation, and within 7 years had risen to the rank of lieutenant. By the time he was 40, he held the rank of commander, overseeing naval intelligence operations that the government has never publicly disclosed in full. He had been deployed 4 times. He had received the Navy Commendation Medal twice and the Defense Meritorious Service Medal once. He spoke 3 languages fluently. He held a master's degree in international relations from Georgetown University, which he completed online during his 3rd deployment. Marcus Ellison was also deeply aware of what it meant to be a black man in America. He had studied civil rights law as part of his personal education. He understood Fourth Amendment protections. He understood the legal boundaries of law enforcement authority. He had, in fact, given presentations to junior Navy personnel about how to conduct themselves calmly and assertively during police encounters. He was not the kind of man who panicked. He was not the kind of man who lost his composure. 22 years of military service had made sure of that. On the evening of March the 14th, Marcus was doing what he did every Tuesday and Thursday evening. He was jogging. He had just completed month 3 of a 12-week fitness program he had designed for himself to prepare for an upcoming naval physical assessment. He lived on Birchwood Lane in Carver Heights, a quiet, predominantly middle-class neighborhood where he had owned his home for 6 years. He was wearing gray running shorts, a black moisture-wicking shirt, and white sneakers. He had wireless earbuds in, listening to a jazz playlist. He was not wearing a hood. He was not carrying anything. He was simply jogging on the sidewalk, following the same 2-mile loop he had run hundreds of times before. He was not trespassing. He was not speeding. He was not being loud or disruptive. He was not in anyone's yard. He was not acting suspiciously by any reasonable definition of that word. He was simply a man jogging in his own neighborhood on a clear Tuesday evening, following every rule exactly as written. Then the patrol car appeared. Marcus noticed the black and white cruiser the moment it turned onto Birchwood Lane and slowed down alongside him. His heart did not race with panic. It raced with a specific kind of awareness, the kind that every black man in America knows, the kind that gets passed down like an inheritance nobody asked for. He removed one earbud. He kept jogging for a few more steps, then slowed to a walk. He was cooperative before a single word had been spoken. The officer who stepped out of that patrol car was Dane Harwick, 31 years old, 4 years on the Carver Heights Police Department. By all accounts from his colleagues, Harwick was considered aggressive, quick to escalate, and had already accumulated 3 internal complaints in 4 years, all of which had been quietly dismissed. He had never faced any formal discipline. This was routine for him. Or so he thought. Hey, stop, come here, Harwick said, his tone already carrying something that was not a question. It was a command delivered with the casual contempt of someone who expected instant obedience. Marcus stopped walking. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" "Where are you coming from?" Harwick asked, stepping closer. "I live on this street. I've been jogging. Is there something I can help you with?" This is where things started to go wrong for Dane Harwick, because rather than answer Marcus's perfectly reasonable question, rather than explain why he had stopped a man for jogging on a public sidewalk, Harwick moved straight past justification and into intimidation. And Marcus Ellison had spent 22 years in a command structure where intimidation tactics were studied, understood, and neutralized. "We got a call about a suspicious person in this area. I need your ID," Harwick said. Marcus remained completely calm. "Can I ask what the suspicious behavior was that was reported? I've been jogging on this sidewalk. I live at the house at the end of this block. I'm not going to debate with you. ID, now." "Officer, I want to cooperate with you. I also want to understand the basis for this stop. I have the right to ask that question." Harwick stepped forward. "You got a real attitude problem, you know that?" Marcus did not move. He did not raise his voice. He kept his hands visible at his sides. "I don't have an attitude, officer. I have questions, and I'm asking them respectfully. Quick question for you watching right now. If someone called the police on you for jogging in your own neighborhood, how would you have handled this moment? Drop a comment below. I genuinely want to know." The dash cam captured everything that happened next with uncomfortable clarity. Harwick moved to within 2 feet of Marcus and pointed at him. "Last time. ID." "I can provide my ID," Marcus said. "I would like to retrieve it from my armband here." He raised his left arm slowly, showing the small, zippered running armband where most joggers keep their phone or cards. "I'm going to unzip this slowly. Is that okay?" Harwick did not answer. Instead, the footage shows him visibly tense. His hand moved toward his belt. And then, without a verbal warning, without a command, without any legal justification whatsoever, Dane Harwick grabbed Marcus Ellison by the arm, spun him, and drove him into the sidewalk. Marcus hit the pavement hard, right knee, left palm. The dashcam audio caught the sound of impact, followed immediately by the sound of Marcus's voice, still controlled, still composed even in that moment. I was complying. I was showing you my ID." Harwick put a knee into Marcus's back. "Stop resisting! Stop resisting!" The footage shows Marcus not resisting. Not once. His hands were flat on the ground. He was not moving. He was not fighting. He was not attempting to flee. He was simply stating, clearly and repeatedly, that he had been in the process of complying with the officer's request when the tackle happened. It lasted 43 seconds from the moment Harwick grabbed him to the moment Marcus was in handcuffs on the sidewalk outside his own home. His ID still in the armband. His house 60 feet away. This is the moment everything changed. Because Dane Harwick had never encountered someone like Marcus Ellison. Most people he stopped were either too frightened or too unfamiliar with the law to push back with precision. He had no idea that the man he had just tackled to the pavement held 2 decades of military rank, a master's degree, a thorough understanding of constitutional law, and absolutely zero intention of letting this moment pass quietly. While Marcus was still in handcuffs sitting on the curb, he said 4 words that Harwick clearly did not expect. "I want your supervisor." Not a demand screamed in anger, not a threat delivered in fear. 4 words, spoken the way a military commander speaks when issuing an instruction that is not up for discussion. Harwick's body camera, which he had activated, ironically, only after the tackle, shows him pausing. You can see him recalibrate. For the first time during that encounter, Harwick looked uncertain. A supervisor arrived 18 minutes later. Marcus identified himself fully. He gave his rank, his service branch, his home address on that very street, and his military identification number. He explained, step by step, every moment of the encounter. The supervisor, to his credit, listened. The footage shows the supervisor looking at Harwick with an expression that Harwick likely recognized as a problem. Marcus was released without charges, not because they decided to be kind, because there were no charges to file. There was nothing, no violation, no crime, no reasonable suspicion that would hold up for 11 seconds in front of a judge. Nothing except a man jogging and an officer who had decided that was enough. Now, most people who experience what Marcus experienced that evening go home shaken. They call a family member. They lie awake. They feel powerless. They might file a complaint online that gets lost in a system designed to lose it. But Marcus Ellison was not most people. He went inside his home, cleaned the road rash on his knee and palm, sat down at his desk, and began writing. Not venting, not ranting. writing. What he produced over the next 3 hours was a formal written complaint that his attorney would later describe as the most meticulously documented civilian complaint she had ever received in 17 years of civil rights law practice. It was 41 pages long. It cited specific Georgia statutes. It cited federal case law. It cited the Carver Heights Police Department's own use of force policy, sections by section, and identified each individual section that Harwick's actions had violated. It included timestamps from the dashcam footage, references to Harwick's 3 prior complaints, and a detailed narrative that read like a legal brief, because in many ways, it was one. He submitted it to the Carver Heights Police Department's Internal Affairs Division at 2:17 in the morning. Then he contacted a civil rights attorney, and by 6:50 a.m., before most of Carver Heights had poured their first cup of coffee, a $3.4 million federal lawsuit had been filed in the United States District Court for the Northern District of Georgia. The Internal Affairs Division received Marcus's complaint on a Wednesday morning. By Friday afternoon, Dane Harwick had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. This was not normal. Usually these reviews take weeks just to schedule the first meeting, but Marcus's complaint was so detailed, so legally precise, and so supported by existing footage evidence that the department could not slow walk it without creating additional legal exposure for themselves. The lead investigator, a 20-year department veteran named Captain Sylvia Okonkwo, pulled Harwick's dashcam footage. She watched it once, then she watched it again. Then she called in the department's legal counsel to watch it with her. The footage confirmed every single word Marcus had written. Harwick had stopped a man jogging on a public sidewalk with no stated reasonable suspicion. He had escalated immediately when asked a reasonable question. He had physically tackled a fully compliant individual who was in the process of retrieving his identification. He had used the phrase, "stop resisting," while his own camera showed no resistance occurring. But there was something else in the footage that made the case even more serious. A moment, just before the tackle, where Harwick's body camera had briefly faced toward his patrol car window, and in that reflection, almost accidentally captured, you could see Harwick's face. And what the investigators described in their internal report as an expression that suggested the decision to use force had already been made before Marcus had done anything at all. Captain Okonkwo's investigation also uncovered that the so-called suspicious person call that Harwick had referenced, it had come from a single anonymous caller who had described a, quote, unfamiliar black man jogging in the neighborhood. No threat described, no crime described, no suspicious behavior described, other than the race of the person and the fact that the caller did not personally recognize him. And the neighborhood where Marcus had lived and owned property for 6 years. The investigation concluded in 19 days. That is remarkably fast for a police misconduct investigation, and the speed itself sent a message. The findings were unambiguous. Dane Harwick had violated the department's use of force policy. He had violated departmental guidelines on reasonable suspicion. He had violated Marcus Ellison's Fourth Amendment rights under the United States Constitution, and the department found that his conduct was consistent with racially discriminatory policing, which triggered an additional review under the department's anti-discrimination policy. The department's recommendation was termination. Dane Harwick resigned before the termination could be made official. His 4-year career with the Carver Heights Police Department ended because of a 43-second encounter with a man who was jogging. When the footage was released to the public as part of the lawsuit's discovery process, the Carver Heights Police Department had initially attempted to argue that releasing it could compromise the investigation. Marcus's legal team pushed back with a public records request that the department's own attorneys admitted was legally airtight. The footage hit the internet on a Thursday afternoon. By Sunday morning, it had 47 million views. News outlets picked it up from Atlanta to London. Social media shared it millions of times across every platform. Civil rights attorneys broke it down frame by frame on YouTube. Military veterans posted response videos. Law school professors incorporated it into course material about Fourth Amendment violations and racially biased policing. The hashtag Commander Ellison trended nationally for 4 consecutive days. Some people praised Marcus for his composure, for his knowledge, for his refusal to panic in a moment that could have turned far more dangerous. Others criticized him, saying he should have just given his ID immediately without asking questions. They said asking questions escalated the situation. They said he should have made himself less threatening. But here is what nobody could deny. Marcus Ellison had done nothing wrong, not a single thing. He had asked reasonable questions. He had been cooperative. He had been in the process of complying when he was tackled. And he had been right about every single thing he said during that encounter and in every single page of that 41-page complaint. The Carver Heights Police Department made significant changes following this incident. All officers were required to complete a revised use of force training program that specifically addressed the legal standards for reasonable suspicion during pedestrian stops. A new departmental policy was established requiring officers to document and report the stated basis for any pedestrian stop before any physical contact. The department also contracted an independent civil rights organization to conduct a review of all complaints filed against officers in the previous 5 years, and they established a community oversight board with actual investigative authority, something advocates had been requesting for over a decade. Essentially, they required their officers to take the kind of training that Marcus Ellison could have taught himself. After the footage went viral, 3 other Carver Heights residents came forward with accounts of aggressive and racially charged stops by Harwick during his 4 years on the force. All 3 were black men. All 3 described similar patterns: the immediate hostility, the refusal to answer questions, the disproportionate escalation. It turned out this was not an isolated incident. It was a pattern, and Marcus's documentation was what finally gave those patterns a legal foundation to stand on. The lawsuit settled 14 months after filing. $3.4 million. The settlement included, in addition to the monetary compensation, a federal consent decree requiring the Carver Heights Police Department to implement and maintain the new training programs and oversight mechanisms for a minimum of 5 years, subject to external review. It was, as Marcus's attorney put it in a press statement, not just a settlement. It was a blueprint. Marcus Ellison continued his naval career. He was promoted to the rank of captain within 18 months of the incident. He used a portion of his settlement to establish a nonprofit organization providing legal education workshops specifically for black men and women about their constitutional rights during police encounters. The workshops have since reached over 12,000 participants across 5 states. He has spoken at Howard University, Morehouse College, and the United States Naval Academy. He is, by every measure, exactly who he was before that Tuesday evening jog, except now millions of people know his name. Dane Harwick, as of the time this story was produced, is no longer in law enforcement. He is not employed by any government agency. Beyond that, this story has nothing further to say about him. Here is a question for you. If you were in Marcus Ellison's position that evening, would you have had the knowledge and the composure to respond the way he did? Be honest with yourself. Comment below. Let us talk about the bigger picture, because this story is about more than one man and one officer on one street in Georgia. This story is about the cost of knowledge, what it means when citizens understand their rights, and what it means when some authority figures count on the assumption that they do not. It is about the intersection of race and power in America, and how those two things collide in ways that destroy lives every single day, in situations that never go viral, never get investigated, never get settled. And it is about accountability. Real accountability, not the performative kind, but the kind that comes with documentation, legal precision, and an absolute refusal to be silent. Most people do not know their constitutional rights in detail. Most people, when a police officer raises their voice, feel their body go into a kind of survival mode, where the only instinct is to comply and disappear as quickly as possible. And some officers, not all, but some, count on exactly that. They count on fear. They count on ignorance. They count on the fact that the person they are stopping does not know the difference between a lawful detention and an unlawful one, does not know that they can ask questions, does not know that they can refuse consent to searches, does not know that compliance and submission are not the same thing. But when you encounter someone like Marcus Ellison, someone who has spent decades in a command structure, who has studied civil rights law, who knows exactly what officers can and cannot do, and who has the discipline to remain calm while exercising that knowledge, the power dynamic shifts. The uniform does not automatically win. The badge does not automatically command unquestioned submission. Knowledge becomes the equalizer, and documentation becomes the weapon. Let us address something that came up in the comments when this story went viral. Some people said Marcus was being difficult. They said he should have just handed over his ID the moment he was asked and avoided all of this. They said his questions escalated the situation. Here is the thing. The footage shows Marcus was in the process of retrieving his ID when Harwick tackled him. He was not refusing. He was complying. He asked 2 questions before the physical confrontation. What suspicious behavior had been reported? And was it okay for him to unzip his armband? Both questions were reasonable. Neither question justified physical force. Not under the law, not under the department's own policies, not under any reasonable standard. As for the argument that he should have just made it easier, that mindset assumes that exercising your rights is the problem. That is not how constitutional law works. Marcus had every legal right to ask for the basis of the stop. Asking that question is not resistance. It is not obstruction. It is a citizen exercising a right that exists specifically because law enforcement authority is not meant to be absolute. Yes, there is a reality that for black men in America, exercising those rights can be physically dangerous. Marcus knew that risk. He had lived with that reality his entire life. He calculated it, and he decided that his dignity and his rights were worth protecting. But the fact that exercising constitutionally protected rights is considered dangerous, that is not a criticism of Marcus Ellison. That is the entire problem this story is about. So what is the lesson from all of this? What should you actually take away from Marcus Ellison's story? First, know your rights before you need them. The time to learn what the Fourth Amendment protects is not while you are standing on a sidewalk in handcuffs. Study it, understand it. Resources exist, and many of them are free. Second, document everything you can, as calmly and thoroughly as possible. Marcus's 41-page complaint was not rage. It was preparation. It was discipline applied to injustice. Documentation is power. Third, composure is not weakness. Every moment Marcus remained calm, articulate, and controlled during that encounter, he was protecting himself and building a case simultaneously. Panic is understandable, but preparation makes composure possible. Fourth, accountability requires action. Filing a complaint is not enough if the complaint is poorly written and legally unsupported. Vague outrage does not move legal systems. Precise, documented, legally grounded action does. Fifth, you do not have to go through it alone. Civil rights attorneys exist, organizations exist, legal aid programs exist. Know what resources are in your community before you ever need them. The time to find a civil rights attorney is not the morning after the incident. It should be information you already have. Sixth, systemic change is possible, but it requires individual accountability first. The consent decree, the new policies, the oversight board, none of that happens without Marcus Ellison refusing to let a 43-second encounter pass without consequences. One person's decision to act created systemic change for an entire community. One man, one jog, 43 seconds, and a police department restructured, a career ended, a $3.4 million settlement reached, and 12,000 people educated about their rights because of what that man chose to do with what happened to him. That is the power of knowledge applied with discipline. That is the importance of accountability that does not flinch. That is what happens when someone refuses to accept that injustice is just the price of existing. Final question for you. What is one thing you learned from this story that you did not know before? Drop your answer in the comments right now. And if this video gave you something, information, perspective, a reason to think, please subscribe, because there are more stories like this one, and every single one of them matters. This story matters because it is not just about Marcus Ellison and Dane Harwick in Carver Heights, Georgia. It is about every person who has ever been stopped for existing in a space someone decided they did not belong in. It is about every complaint that was filed and buried because it was not precise enough to survive a system that was designed to resist it. It is about every community that has demanded oversight and been told to be patient right up until the moment someone handed them 41 pages of undeniable documentation and a federal lawsuit. It is about the gap between the rights that exist on paper and the rights that people actually experience in practice. Marcus Ellison's story shows that you can fight back, you can document, you can litigate, you can win, and sometimes, not always, not as often as it should happen, but sometimes you can use one moment of injustice to change the policies that allowed that moment to happen in the first place. Not every story ends this way. Not every encounter results in a settlement. Not every complaint leads to termination. Not every viral video produces a consent decree, but this one did. And that matters more than you might think, because every time it does happen, it shows someone else that it is possible. And possibility, in the face of a system this large and this resistant to change, is not nothing. Possibility is everything. That is Marcus Ellison's legacy. Not just the $3.4 million, and not just the reforms in Carver Heights, but the 12,000 people sitting in community centers and university auditoriums who now know exactly what to say, exactly what to document, and exactly what to do the next time someone in a uniform mistakes their presence for a problem. This is the story of how a racist officer tackled a 45-year-old black Navy commander and a $3.4 million lawsuit hit overnight. But more than that, it is the story of what happens when you refuse to let 43 seconds define you, and instead use those 43 seconds to change everything.